The glass hit the floor before anyone could react. Victor Hayes had swept it off the table with the back of his hand, not because it was empty, not because the wine was wrong, but because Sophia Bennett had looked him in the eye when he spoke to her, and he didn't like it. "You think I'm talking to you for your opinion?" he said. The entire restaurant froze, and Sophia stood there, her hand trembling, wine spreading across the tile like a wound. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, drop the name of your city in the comments below, and stay with us until the very end. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Sophia Bennett had worked the dinner shift at Moretti's 6 nights a week for the past 3 years, and in those 3 years, she had learned one thing above everything else. You survived the night by disappearing inside it. You smiled when the table snapped at you. You nodded when a man talked to you like your furniture. You refilled the water glasses before they could complain they were empty, because an empty glass gave a certain kind of man permission to raise his voice. And a raised voice in a restaurant like this, with white tablecloths and amber lighting, and a clientele that wore suits to dinner on a Tuesday, could turn into something you didn't want turning into something. She had learned this the hard way, not here, not at Moretti's. Somewhere else, a long time ago, a place she didn't let herself think about past midnight, because if she thought about it past midnight, she wouldn't sleep, and if she didn't sleep, couldn't work, and if she couldn't work, she couldn't stay ahead of everything that was still trying to catch up with her. So Sophia Bennett smiled and nodded and disappeared inside the shift, until the night table 7 walked in. She knew before he sat down that he was going to be difficult. There were men who walked into a room like they owned the air inside it, and Victor Hayes was one of them. He was broad-shouldered, mid-50s, with silver hair slicked back and a jaw that looked like it had never once considered the possibility that anyone would tell him no. He had 2 men with him, younger, quieter, the kind of quiet that came from being hired to be quiet, and they settled into the corner booth near the back window with the ease of men who expected the world to rearrange itself around them. Sophia picked up the menus and walked over. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Moretti's. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Victor Hayes didn't look at her. He was studying the room, scanning it the way a man scans a room when he's not there for the food. His eyes moved across the tables, across the bar, across the framed photograph on the far wall, the one of Lorenzo Moretti shaking hands with the mayor, taken 5 years ago, hanging there the way kings hung portraits of themselves. Victor looked at that photograph for a long moment. Then he picked up the menu without acknowledging her. "Give us a minute," one of the younger men said. Sophia nodded and stepped back. She returned 4 minutes later. Victor Hayes still hadn't looked at her. She asked about drinks again. This time he ordered without looking up from the menu scotch, neat, the good one, and he said the name of the label, the way people say names when they're testing you to see if you know what it means. She knew what it meant. She brought it. He took 1 sip and pushed the glass 2 inches toward the edge of the table. "This isn't the right one," he said. "I'm sorry, sir, that is the I know what I ordered." He finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of dirty water and just as warm. "I'm telling you this isn't it." Sophia held still. "I can bring the bottle out so you can see the label, if that would help." "What would help," Victor said slowly, "is if you stopped arguing with me." The younger man on his left shifted in his seat, not uncomfortably the way a person shifts when they're settling in to watch something unfold. Sophia set her jaw. "Of course, I'll bring you another." She brought another, same label, same pour. Victor picked it up, swirled it once, and set it back down. "It's fine," he said, like it had been fine the entire time, like he knew it. She went through the first hour of their dinner, with her teeth pressed together behind her smile. His food was wrong 3 times. The lighting near his table bothered him. He sent his steak back, not because it was overcooked, but because he wanted to see how long it would take. She could feel the other tables watching, not loudly. Just the quiet way people watch when they can sense something building, and they're grateful it isn't happening to them. By the time she brought the dessert menu, her feet hurt and her patience was a thread pulled so thin she could see through it. And then Victor Hayes said something to his colleague, something low, something she wasn't supposed to hear, and both men laughed. She had caught 3 words of it, brings new meaning. She didn't need the rest. "Is there anything else I can get you this evening?" she asked. "Yeah." Victor leaned back. A smile that doesn't look like it's costing you so much effort. The table beside them, a couple in their 60s, celebrating something. The woman had a corsage, went very still. I smile when there's something to smile about, Sophia said. She didn't plan to say it. It came out the way things come out when you've spent too many years swallowing everything, and your throat finally decides it's had enough. The temperature at table 7 dropped 10 degrees. Victor Hayes tilted his head, very slowly, the way a man tilts his head when he wants you to understand that you have made a mistake. Say that again? I said I smile when there's something to smile about. She kept her voice level, calm, the kind of calm that is its own kind of courage. Is there anything else I can bring you this evening? He looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his wine glass, a full glass of red, the one she'd brought without being asked because she'd been trying to smooth the entire evening over, and he swept it off the table. It didn't fall. It flew. The glass hit the floor and shattered, and the wine arsed out in a wide red spray and caught the hem of her uniform and the side of her shoe and the floor around her feet, and for 1 second, the entire restaurant stopped breathing. Every table, every server, the bartender halfway through pouring a drink, all of it, frozen. That's what I think of your smile, Victor Hayes said. Sophia didn't move. She was aware in a distant and almost scientific way that her hand was shaking. She pressed it flat against her hip and told it to stop, and it mostly listened. The wine was soaking through the canvas of her shoe. She could feel it, cold and then warm, the way a humiliation settles in after the initial shock of it. She looked at him, and she thought not for the first time in her life, but with a clarity she hadn't felt in years, I am so tired of men like you. I'll have someone clean that up, she said. She bent down to begin collecting the larger pieces of glass. Leave it. Victor's voice was flat. I didn't tell you to touch it. Sir, I said leave it. He leaned forward now, elbows on the table, dropping his voice to something that was meant to sound reasonable but felt like a hand closing around a throat. You're going to stand there, and you're going to apologize, and then you're going to get my check. And you're going to do it without that look on your face, because I don't like that look. What look? Like you think you're better than this. She held his gaze, the check, of course. She straightened, and Victor Hayes stood up. He was taller than she'd clocked from a distance. And she understood, in the part of her brain that remembered other rooms and other men who stood up when they didn't need to, what was about to happen. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, not violently. That was the thing that made it worse. It was controlled, deliberate, a grip that said I can do whatever I want in this room, and everyone in this room knows it. I wasn't finished talking to you. Let go of my wrist, she said. When I'm done, let go. He squeezed. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough for her to feel it. Hard enough for the couple at the next table to see it and look away, because looking away was safer than being the next person Victor Hayes decided needed to learn a lesson. You don't work at a place like this because you have options, Victor said, very quietly, very evenly. You work here because you need this job, so I'm going to suggest that you take a breath, lose the attitude, and remember where you are. Didn't take a breath. She looked him dead in the eye and said very clearly, I know exactly where I am. Do you? Something moved across his face then. Something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite surprise, but lived in the territory between the two. His grip tightened, and then his grip became something else. He yanked her arm, not a pull, a yank, the kind that makes a sound, that she felt in her shoulder socket, that made an involuntary noise come out of her mouth, and she stumbled forward against the table edge, catching herself on her palm, and the silverware rattled, and the water glasses shook, and the corsage on the woman's wrist at the next table trembled like it was afraid. The room was completely silent. Not a fork moved, not a glass clinked, not a breath drawn anywhere in that restaurant. That wasn't the quietest breath that person had ever taken in their life. Sophia's shoulder was singing. Her palm was pressed against the white tablecloth. She could feel Victor Hayes standing over her, and she thought very clearly, in the still center of everything, I have been here before. I have been in this exact place before, and I am still standing. She pushed herself upright. She turned to face him. And the front door of Moretti's opened. She heard it before she saw it, the specific sound of that door, which was heavier than most restaurant doors, which had a particular weight to its opening that she had learned over 3 years, the way you learn the sounds of a place you spend more time in than your own home. She heard it open, and she watched Victor Hayes's face change. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way weather changes gradually, and then completely. She watched the certainty drain out of his expression. She watched the casual authority of his posture, that easy practiced ownership, begin to recalibrate. She watched his two associates, the quiet ones, go very still in a way that was different from the restaurant's stillness. Their stillness was animal. Alert, she turned. Lorenzo Moretti was not a large man. That was always the thing people didn't expect. They heard the name, they heard the stories, they imagined someone enormous. What they got was a man of average height, lean, somewhere in his late 40s, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than most people made in a month. Dark hair, a little silver at the temples, a face that had learned a long time ago how to tell you nothing while seeing everything. He stood in the doorway for one moment, just one, and he looked at the room, his restaurant, his tables and his lighting and his staff and his customers, and, at the center of all of it, a woman in a wine-stained uniform, standing with her chin up and her shoulder aching, and a man's handprint already starting to redden on her wrist. Lorenzo Moretti walked inside. He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing Sophia would remember later, going over it in the small hours of the night when she couldn't sleep. He never raised his voice. He walked to the bar, said something to Marco, her manager, a round-faced man who had developed the ability to look panicked while appearing completely calm, and Marco nodded once and disappeared toward the back. Then Lorenzo walked toward table 7. His two men she hadn't even noticed when they'd come in, which was part of the point, had positioned themselves at angles she understood, without being able to explain how she understood them. Victor Hayes watched him come and drew himself up like a man reminding himself he had every right to be standing exactly where he was. Lorenzo, his voice was carefully neutral. I didn't know this was your place. You knew. Lorenzo stopped 3 feet from the table. He didn't look at the broken glass on the floor. He didn't look at the shattered stem or the spreading stain. He looked at Victor Hayes. You've been in this restaurant before. A beat. I might have been. You have been. Lorenzo's voice was conversational. The kind of conversational that is its own form of danger. 3 years ago, December, you were with Marcus Webb. You sat at the bar. I was here. Victor Hayes held his gaze. Good memory. I remember things that matter. Lorenzo turned then slowly, deliberately, giving Victor Hayes the gift of knowing that turning his back was a choice, not an oversight, and he looked at Sophia. He looked at her the way almost no one had looked at her in this restaurant or anywhere else in the past 3 years. Like she was the most important person in the room. Are you hurt? He asked. It was such a simple question. 4 words. And Sophia Bennett, who had not cried in this restaurant or anywhere else in public in longer than she could honestly remember, felt something behind her eyes go sharp and hot and had to press her tongue against the roof of her mouth to keep it from becoming anything visible. I'm fine, she said. Lorenzo looked at her wrist. He looked at it for 1 second. Then he looked back at Victor Hayes. And whatever was in his expression in that moment, whatever it was, because it wasn't anger exactly, it was something older and colder and far more specific than anger, made the 2 quiet men at the table push back their chairs very slowly and put their hands where everyone could see them. I run a clean business, Lorenzo said to Victor. You know what that means? It means you're careful, Victor said. It means I have rules. Lorenzo reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table. That's a check for your dinner. It's been paid, and it's the last meal you will ever eat in any establishment I own. All of them, in this city and outside of it. Victor stared at the folded paper. You're doing this over a waitress. I'm doing this because someone put their hands on a person in my restaurant, Lorenzo said. The who doesn't change the what. She was disrespectful. Go home, Victor. 3 words. No volume, no heat. Just 3 words delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who has never in his adult life had to say anything twice. Victor Hayes looked at him for a long time. Then he picked up his jacket. He looked at Sophia, a look that was meant to communicate something, a look that wanted to be a threat but had lost its footing, and he turned and walked to the door. His 2 men followed. The door closed behind them. And Moretti's restaurant slowly, carefully, like a person after a very long time underwater finally reaching air, began to breathe again. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then Lorenzo turned to the restaurant, to all of it, to every table and every face, and he said, in a voice that carried easily without effort, I apologize for the disruption. Dinner tonight is on the house. Marco will arrange everything. A few murmurs. The couple with the corsage, the woman reached out and touched her husband's hand. The bartender went back to his pour. The 2 servers who had been frozen near the kitchen pass-through began moving again, carefully, the way people move when they're trying to look like they hadn't just watched something that would keep them up at night. Lorenzo turned back to Sophia, Come with me, it wasn't an order. She had heard orders her whole life, and she knew what they sounded like. This was something else, an invitation delivered by a man who expected you to accept it, but an invitation nonetheless. She followed him to the back office past the kitchen, where the line cooks pretended they hadn't been watching through the porthole window, past the dry storage room, through the narrow hallway that smelled like olive oil and old wood, and into the room that Marco usually occupied, which had a desk and 2 chairs and a first aid kit on the shelf that had clearly never been opened. Lorenzo took the first aid kit down. Sit, he said. I told you I'm fine. You're holding your arm against your side like it hurts. She hadn't realized she was doing it. She stopped. She sat. He opened the first aid kit with the practiced efficiency of a man who had used one before, and he pulled up a chair across from her, and he took her wrist carefully. A completely different kind of careful than the hand that had grabbed it 20 minutes ago and looked at it in the light. It'll bruise, he said. It's not the first bruise I've had. Something moved across his face, not pity. She would have stood up and walked out if it had been pity. It was something more careful than that, more considered. How long have you worked here? He asked. 3 years. And before this? She looked at him. Why? Because I own this restaurant, he said. And I've never spoken to you before tonight. And I want to understand why I didn't know what was happening in my own dining room. She was quiet for a moment. Nothing was happening in your dining room, she said. Not until tonight. He was just rude. Customers are rude. That wasn't rude. No, a beat. No, it wasn't. Lorenzo set her wrist down carefully. He sat back. He looked at her with those eyes that gave nothing away and saw everything. Sophia, he said. He said her name like he'd read it off a file, which he probably had at some point, which should have felt strange but somehow didn't. What did you mean when you told him you knew where you were? She frowned. What? He said. Remember where you are, and you said I know exactly where I am. Do you? Lorenzo tilted his head slightly. It was a very specific thing to say. She hadn't expected him to have heard that. She'd thought he'd arrived after. I meant, this is your restaurant, she said carefully. And he seemed to have forgotten that. Lorenzo studied her. Is that what you meant? The silence sat between them. And Sophia Bennett, who was very good at silence, who had been using silence as armor and camouflage for years, felt this particular silence pressing on something she had kept very tightly closed. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing you don't want to give, he said. She laughed, a small, involuntary sound that surprised both of them. That's a very careful answer. I'm a careful man. You didn't seem very careful out there. No. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to one. I wasn't, was I? The first aid kit sat open between them. She hadn't let him wrap anything, but the act of him opening it, the act of him sitting across from her and treating this as something that required attention, that required care, was doing something to the careful architecture she had spent years constructing inside her chest. She didn't want it to do that. She made a point of not wanting it. I should get back to the floor, she said. Marco is covering the floor. I still have tables. Sophia. He said her name again, differently this time. Go home tonight, with pay. I'll have Marco arrange. I don't need that. You're hurt. I need the hours. She said it flatly, without embarrassment, because she had learned that embarrassment about money was a luxury she couldn't afford. I have rent. I have a car payment. I need the hours. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and removed a card. He set it on the desk between them, not handing it to her, setting it there so that she could decide whether to pick it up. That's my direct number, he said. If anything like tonight happens again in this restaurant, or anywhere near it, I want you to call it. She looked at the card. She didn't pick it up. Why? She asked. Because it shouldn't have taken me walking in the door tonight to make that stop, he said. And I want to fix that. She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the card. She went back to the floor. She finished her shift. She collected her tips, which were better than usual guilt tips. Conscience tips. The kind of money people leave when they watched something happen and didn't do anything, and they need the gratuity to tell themselves they're better than the moment. And she counted them in the break room at 11:47 p.m. with her hands that had stopped shaking somewhere around the 9th table. Marco found her there. You good? He asked. Yeah. He stood in the doorway, a little uncomfortable in the way men get when they know they should have done something and didn't. Sophia, I want you to know that when it happened, I was going to Marco, she looked up at him. It's fine, he nodded. He looked relieved in a way she found more tiring than the rest of the evening combined. She drove home. She lived 20 minutes from the restaurant in an apartment on the third floor of a building that had seen better decades. And she had chosen it specifically because it was on the third floor and the landlord had agreed to add a deadbolt, and because the parking lot had a light that worked and nobody could look directly into her windows from the street. She sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before going inside. That was a habit too. She told herself it was because she needed to decompress after a long shift. She mostly believed it. Her wrist had started to turn. Not badly. A bruise the size of a thumb, which was accurate because that was exactly what it was. She looked at it. Then she reached into her apron pocket and took out Lorenzo Moretti's card. She turned it over in her hands. It was a good card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of quality that communicated everything it needed to communicate without saying any of it. Just his name and the number, no title, no company name. Like he expected whoever was holding the card to already know. She almost put it in the glove compartment. That would have been the smart thing. Keep it the way you keep things you don't trust at a distance, behind something else, accessible but inconvenient. Instead, she put it in her wallet, behind her license, in the slot where she kept things she actually needed. She went upstairs. She checked the deadbolt twice. She took a shower and stood under the water until it went cold, because she hadn't been paying attention to the time. She put on the oversized sweatshirt she slept in and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and pressed her fingers against her wrist. I know exactly where I am, do you? She hadn't said that for Victor Hayes. She had said sit for herself, a reminder, a small, private declaration in the middle of the worst moment of the evening that she was still here, still standing, still the person who decided what came next. 3 years in this city, 3 years in this apartment on the third floor with the working parking lot light. 3 years of shifts and tips and car payments and checking the deadbolt twice and building a life so quiet and so careful that nobody could find the seams of it. Raymond hadn't found her, not yet. She told herself that. She had been telling herself that for 3 years with varying degrees of conviction, and tonight the conviction was thinner than usual because something had happened tonight that she hadn't planned for. Someone had looked at her and seen her. Not the waitress. Not the smile, not the woman who disappeared inside the shift. Her. She lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling and thought about eyes that gave nothing away and saw everything, and the weight of a card in the slot behind her license, and the specific sound of a restaurant door opening when it shouldn't have, and saying everything just by opening. She thought about Lorenzo Moretti asking, "Are you hurt?" Like the answer mattered. Like she mattered, and Sophia Bennett, who had not cried in public, in longer than she could honestly remember, pressed her face into the pillow in the absolute privacy of her own dark apartment, and let herself, just for a minute. Then she stopped, she rolled over, set her alarm for 7 a.m., and lay in the dark. Because tomorrow was a workday, and she had hours she needed. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, lying there in the dark with her alarm set, and her deadbolt checked, and her careful quiet life assembled, like a wall around her, was that across the city, in an office on the 14th floor of a building she had never been inside, a man was looking at a photograph on a screen. The photograph was recent. A parking lot. Third-floor apartment building. Working light. He had been looking for a long time, and he had finally found what he was looking for. Raymond Cole set down his phone. He picked up his jacket, and he smiled. Raymond Cole was not a man who made mistakes twice. That was the thing about him, the thing Sophia had understood too late. Back when understanding it would have made a difference. He was methodical, patient, the kind of patient that looked like calm on the outside and was something else entirely underneath. He could wait 6 months, a year, 2 years, and never let the waiting show. Never let the frustration leak into his face or his voice, or the particular way he held himself in a room. He had waited 3 years, and now he had found her. He sat in his car outside a diner 4 blocks from her apartment building, not outside her building. Not yet, because Raymond Cole did not make mistakes twice, and he drank black coffee from a paper cup, and he thought about the photograph on his phone, and he thought about the fact that she had a third-floor apartment, and a deadbolt, and a parking lot with a working light. She had been careful. He was proud of her in his way. The way a hunter is proud of an animal that made the chase interesting. He made 3 phone calls. The first was to a man named Dennis, who handled logistics. The second was to a man named Price, who handled complications. The third to Victor Hayes. Victor picked up on the second ring. "I heard you had an interesting evening," Raymond said. A pause. Word travels. "In my direction always." Raymond turned his coffee cup in his hand. "The woman at Moretti's, the waitress." Another pause. Longer this time. "What about her?" "Her name is Sophia Cole," Raymond said. "She was my wife." The silence on the other end of the line lasted 4 full seconds. Raymond counted them. "You're telling me," Victor said slowly, "that I grabbed Lorenzo Moretti's waitress, and she's my wife," Raymond said. "Yes, she's using Bennett. She's been using Bennett for 3 years." Raymond set his coffee cup down. "I've been looking for 3 years. And tonight you walked into the right restaurant and made enough noise that I had someone pull the staff records." He paused. "I almost want to thank you." Victor Hayes said something under his breath. "Then Raymond, if Moretti's involved." "He's not involved. He's a restaurant owner who got sentimental about a waitress. He's not just I know what he is." Raymond's voice was even. Perfectly even. "And I know what I am, and I know which one of us my wife belongs to. She stopped being your wife when she ran. That's not how I see it." He ended the call. He picked up his coffee. Outside, the parking lot light was working fine. 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. He could wait one more night. He was good at waiting. Sophia woke up at 7 a.m. with her alarm and her shoulder aching, and the particular morning after clarity that comes when you've cried yourself to sleep and your body has processed most of it and left the rest in your joints. She made coffee. She stood at the counter and drank it and didn't look at her phone, which was a decision she made every morning deliberately, because the first thing she looked at in the morning set the temperature for the rest of the day, and she needed to control that. Her wrist was purple. Not dramatically, a soft, spreading bruise that she covered with the sleeve of her jacket without spending more time thinking about it than she had to. She had the morning off. She didn't go back until 4. She did laundry. She paid 2 bills online. She called her landlord about a faucet that had been dripping for 6 weeks and left a voicemail she knew he'd return in 3 to 5 business days if she was lucky. She ate a bowl of cereal, standing at the counter because the table in her apartment had become mostly a place where mail collected, and she hadn't cared enough about that to change it. She was good at this, at the maintenance of a life, at keeping things functional and moving and forward-facing, without making room for anything bigger. She was halfway through rinsing her bowl when someone knocked on her door. She went still. She stood at the sink for a moment, water running over her hands, and she told herself it was the landlord about the faucet, which was impossible given that she'd just left a voicemail. Or it was the neighbor from 3B who sometimes borrowed her parking spot by accident. Or it was the woman from the building office who came around every few months about something administrative and always looked apologetic about it. She turned off the water. She walked to the door. She didn't open it. Who is it? Building maintenance. She hadn't called building maintenance. She'd called her landlord. Different. "I didn't put in a maintenance request," she said. "A beat. Got it on the work order, ma'am."
Faucet issue, Unit 307.
Her unit number. Her faucet. Her call from 40 minutes ago. She put her hand on the deadbolt and didn't turn it. "My landlord said someone would come by. I just want to confirm the name of the company." Silence. Not the silence of a maintenance worker checking his clipboard. A different kind of silence. She stepped back from the door. Her phone was on the counter. She picked it up and she stood in the middle of her apartment, and she thought, with a clarity that was almost cold, "He found me." She didn't know how. She didn't know when. She only knew that Raymond Cole was not a man who made mistakes, and that someone knocking on her door at 9:15 in the morning claiming to be maintenance when she'd called 40 minutes ago about a faucet was not a coincidence, and that she had exactly the seconds it would take to do something before this became something she couldn't undo. She went to her bedroom. She pulled the bag from under her bed, the bag she had packed on her 3rd day in this apartment, and repacked every 6 months to make sure everything in it still fit and still worked. Cash ID, a change of clothes, the small things that meant she could be somewhere else by nightfall if she had to. She put the bag on her shoulder. She looked at her phone. She had 2 options. She had mapped them out in her head 100 times over 3 years, the way you map out exits in a building, the way you catalog them before you need them so that when you need them, you don't have to think. Option 1, she called 911, which meant police, which meant reports and questions and a system that had, in her experience, the specific inefficiency of a door without a lock, a lot of structure, and very little actual protection. Or she opened her wallet. She looked at the card behind her license. And she thought about a man who had looked at her and asked, "Are you hurt?" Like the answer mattered. She dialed the number. It rang once. Moretti. She hadn't expected him to answer that fast. She hadn't prepared for the immediate reality of his voice on the other end of the line. And for 1 second her tongue went useless. "It's Sophia," she said. "Sophia Bennett from the restaurant." A half-beat of silence. Not long. "What's wrong? Not who is this or how did you get this number?" The card, of course she had the card, but what's wrong? Immediate, oriented. "Someone knocked on my door this morning," she said, claiming to be maintenance. "I didn't call maintenance. I called my landlord about a faucet." She kept her voice low, not because she thought whoever was outside could hear her, but because she was managing herself. "I think I might have a problem." What kind of problem? She had not said Raymond's name out loud to another person in 3 years. She pressed her back against the bedroom wall, and she said it. "My ex-husband, his name is Raymond Cole. I left him 3 years ago. I changed my name, I've been careful." Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. "I don't know how he found me, but I think someone at my door this morning is connected to him." The silence on Lorenzo's end was 3 seconds. Exactly 3. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes, I haven't opened the door." "Don't open the door." A sound in the background, movement, a chair. "Is there a back exit in your building?" "Stairwell at the end of the hall. Goes down to the service exit. Go there now. Don't go to the parking lot. Walk 4 blocks east. There's a coffee shop on the corner of Halsted and Monroe, you know it?" She did. She had walked past it 100 times. "I know it. I'll have someone there in 12 minutes. You'll see a black car outside. The driver's name is Caruso. He'll say your name." "Lorenzo, 12 minutes, Sophia. Go now." She went. She made it to the service exit in under 2 minutes. She didn't run running. Would have made her visible. Would have made her the thing that was moving when everything else was still. She walked quickly and quietly, the bag on her shoulder, her heart doing something loud and complicated inside her ribs, and she pushed through the service door into the alley behind the building. The morning air was cold. The sky was the flat gray of a city morning that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. She walked. She counted blocks instead of thinking. It was a technique she had learned in the bad years. Give your mind something specific to do, and it won't have room to spiral. 1 block, 2 blocks. The diner on the corner with the breakfast special sign. 3 blocks. The dry cleaners that was always open at strange hours. 4 blocks. The coffee shop, the black car. A man leaning against the driver's door, heavy-set, 50s. The kind of face that had seen considerable things and was not impressed by any of them. He looked at her and said, "Sophia," not a question. "A confirmation," she said. He opened the back door. She got in. Lorenzo was waiting in the coffee shop. He had a table in the back, away from the windows, and he was on the phone when she came in, but he ended the call immediately and stood up. He looked at her, the bag on her shoulder, the jacket she'd thrown on over her pajama top, the specific expression of a person who had just run a controlled emergency while trying not to look like they were running an emergency. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He sat across from her. "You packed a bag," he said. "Yes. How long has that bag been under your bed?" She looked at him. 3 years. Something moved through his expression. He didn't say anything for a moment. A server appeared, and he ordered coffee for both of them without asking her, which should have annoyed her, and somehow didn't. "Tell me about Raymond Cole," he said. "Tell me why." "Because someone connected to him was at your apartment this morning. And because I need to know what I'm dealing with." "You're not dealing with anything," she said. "This is my problem." "Sophia," he said her name quietly. "I understand why you'd say that. And I understand why you'd mean it. But someone is using my restaurant as a place to find my staff. That makes it my concern whether you want it to or not." She looked at him for a long time. The coffee came. She wrapped both hands around the cup. "Raymond Cole is not a man you deal with," she said. "He's not a man you negotiate with or reason with, or he's the kind of man who decides what belongs to him and doesn't change his mind. Ever. When I left, I took our daughter and I drove through the night, and I changed my name and I started over from zero." She paused. "Our daughter is in Boston. Safe house, a shelter I arranged before I left. She's 13 now. She's with people I trust, and Raymond doesn't know where she is." Lorenzo had gone very still across the table. "His own daughter," he said. "His property." Her voice was flat, not cold flat. The way a voice gets when it's been over certain territory so many times that the emotion has compressed into something denser. "That's how he sees people. What belongs to him? How did he find you?" Victor Hayes. She said the name and watched Lorenzo's jaw set. Last night, when Victor grabbed me, someone pulled the staff records. Raymond has people everywhere. He's connected to several criminal organizations across the Midwest. Victor being one of them, apparently. She looked at her coffee. It was me being stupid. I should have de-escalated last night. Instead of I should have just... Don't. Lorenzo's voice was sharp enough to cut through the sentence. Do that. She looked up. What you did last night was exactly what you should have done, he said. You stood up. That's not stupidity. What Victor Hayes did is the reason we're sitting here, not what you said to him. She opened her mouth. She closed it. In the 3 years since she'd left Raymond, in all the counselors and shelters and careful, quiet mornings she'd built one on top of another, she could count on one hand the number of times someone had said that to her, and meant it the way he meant it, without an agenda, without a caveat, without the subtle implication that she could have managed the situation better. He'll come back, she said. Raymond, he's already found me. He doesn't stop. No, Lorenzo agreed. He won't stop. So we need to talk about what happens next. What does we mean in that sentence? He looked at her steadily. It means I'm not letting you handle this alone. You don't know me. I know enough. You know I'm your waitress. I know you packed a bag 3 years ago and kept it ready every single day because you were smart enough to understand that one day you might need to run. He leaned forward slightly. I know you didn't call the police this morning. I know you called me. And I know that tells me something. She looked at him. It tells you I was desperate, she said. It tells me you made a judgment call, he said. And I'd like to think it was a good one. She told him the rest of it over the next 40 minutes, which was the longest she'd spoken about Raymond Cole to anyone in 3 years. She told it without the emotion, not because she didn't have it, but because she had made a decision somewhere in the second year of her new life that the story was hers to carry, but not hers to perform. She stated it plainly, the marriage. The first time he had grabbed her, which had been the 3rd month, when she had asked about a bank account. The way it had escalated over 7 years, the way water erodes stone slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize the landscape has completely changed. The night she had left, which had been a Tuesday in November, and she had packed her daughter into the car at 3 a.m. while Raymond was in another city for business, and she had driven and stopped for gas twice, and not once looked in the rearview mirror. Because if she looked in the rearview mirror, she would see her life receding behind her, and she needed to not see that until she was far enough away that receding was the point. Lorenzo listened to all of it. He asked 3 questions. Just 3 precise, specific, the questions of a man who listened carefully and extracted what mattered. The 3rd question was, Victor Hayes. What's his relationship to Raymond exactly? Business, she said. Raymond launders money through legitimate fronts. Victor Hayes owns several of them restaurants, import companies. They've worked together for years. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. So Victor wasn't at my restaurant by accident last night, he said. She looked at him. She hadn't thought of it that way. She had thought of it as coincidence, Victor at the wrong restaurant, her at the wrong table, everything colliding badly. But she saw what Lorenzo was seeing now, and the coldness that moved through her was a different kind than the one she'd felt at her apartment door. You think he knew I worked there, she said. I think Raymond Cole has been narrowing the search for 3 years, Lorenzo said. And I think Victor Hayes walking into my restaurant, into my specific dining room, on a night I happened to come in, that's a very narrow coincidence. You think it was for you, she said slowly. Not for me. He wanted you to, he wanted to provoke you. He wanted me to react and make noise, Lorenzo said. So that however Raymond is tracking, you would pick up a signal. The coffee shop was filling up around them. Morning commuters, a woman with a stroller, 2 college students arguing about something with headphones around their necks. Ordinary, completely ordinary. And here at this back table, a woman who had been found and a man who was deciding what to do about it. This is bigger than a waitress, Sophia said. You're not just a waitress, he said. You know what I mean. She pressed her fingers against her coffee cup. Victor Hayes and Raymond Cole are using your restaurant as a piece in something they're already playing. That's what I am, a piece, a lever. If Raymond can get to me, he can get to my daughter. And if they've framed this to involve you, then they expect me to care enough to respond, Lorenzo said. And they're calculating that my response costs me more than it costs them. He sat back. For a long moment, he was quiet in the way he'd been quiet the night before in the dining room. That particular stillness that had nothing to do with passivity and everything to do with a man letting information, Settle in something actionable. They're wrong, he said. Lorenzo, do you have anywhere to go today? He asked. Somewhere Raymond doesn't know. I have a friend. Ellen. She's in Evanston. Raymond doesn't know about her. Go to Ellen's. Don't go back to your apartment today. He paused. Or tonight. She shook her head. My things are there. Everything I've built is in that apartment. I'm not running again. I'm not asking you to run. His voice was careful. I'm asking you to step out of the way while I find out exactly how much Raymond Cole knows and how far this goes. One day, maybe two. Then you make every decision going forward with full information. That's not running. That's strategy. She looked at him. He was not Raymond Cole. She knew the difference between being managed and being helped. She had paid for that knowledge with 7 years of her life. This was different. The card set on a desk instead of placed in her hand. The door he left open. One day, she said. One day, he agreed. She pulled out her phone and texted Ellen. Then she looked up. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with some people who know things, he said. About Victor Hayes, about Raymond Cole, about what exactly they think they're building. Be careful, she said. Raymond is not. I know what he is, Lorenzo said. I've dealt with men like Raymond Cole my entire professional life. The difference between Raymond Cole and the men I've dealt with is that Raymond preys on people who have no one behind them. He looked at her directly. You're not alone behind you anymore. She held his gaze. You don't owe me this, she said. No, he agreed. I don't. He said it the way you say a thing when the owing is beside the point. She was in a cab to Evanston when his number showed up on her phone again. She answered. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly, he said. Okay. Raymond Cole, does he know about the restaurant? That it's mine specifically? She thought about it. He knows I work somewhere Italian. He knows the neighborhood. If he's been tracking me, he knows the neighborhood. He might not have the specific name, but Victor Hayes does. Victor Hayes sat in your bar 3 years ago. A pause. Lorenzo, what did you find out? He was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. The particular quiet of someone deciding how much to say. Raymond Cole has been in Chicago for 10 days, he said. He's not here because he tracked a waitress. He was already here. He's been here meeting with Victor Hayes and 2 other men I'm going to need to have conversations with. Another beat. You weren't the mission, Sophia. You were a bonus. The cab moved through traffic. She watched a woman in a yellow coat walk a dog on the sidewalk. He's here for you, she said. He's here for my territory, Lorenzo said. And he's been using the search for you as cover, as a reason to have people moving around my businesses and asking questions. A pause. You didn't lead him to me. He used you to get access to my city. She let that sit. So what you said last night, she said slowly, about Victor not being in your restaurant by accident. Victor was there to give Raymond a reason to have his people in my neighborhood. And you being there, recognizing you, that was unexpected. That was a genuine accident. But now he knows, Lorenzo confirmed. Which means, this stopped being about territory the moment he confirmed you were alive and well, and working in my restaurant. She closed her eyes. He's going to come for me, yes. And through me, he's going to try to get to you. He's going to try. Outside the window, the city moved past her. Chicago in the morning gray and loud and alive and enormous and full of people who had no idea that any of this existed. Lorenzo, she said, still here. She pressed her fingertips against her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. My daughter Emma, she's 13. She's in Boston. If Raymond figures out where she is, he won't. You can't promise that. I can have people watching her by this afternoon, he said. People I trust, not to intervene unless necessary. Just to watch, to make sure. She sat with that. A man she had known for less than 24 hours, offering to put protection on her daughter. She should have said no. She had a list along one of the reasons that accepting help from a man like Lorenzo Moretti came with its own set of complications and obligations and the specific kind of debt that was hard to quantify and harder to repay. She knew all of that. Yes, she said, please, a beat. Done, he said. She lowered the phone from her ear. The cab was turning onto Ellen Street, the ordinary houses. The ordinary morning, the ordinary world that had no idea. She thought about Raymond in this city for 10 days. Moving through it, sitting in meetings, using the search for her as camouflage, while he positioned himself against a man who had no idea she was the common thread between them. She thought about the night before, Victor's hand on her wrist, the restaurant going silent, the door opening. And she thought about the fact that she had gone back to work and finished her shift and counted her tips and driven home and checked her deadbolt and not told a single person that her shoulder was still singing and her wrist was turning purple. And somewhere in the city, a man had known her name and her address and her face for 3 years and had just confirmed all of it. She had carried it alone. She had been carrying it alone for so long that she had started to mistake the carrying for strength. But there was a difference between carrying something alone because you were strong and carrying something alone because you believed, somewhere deep and somewhere true, that you were the only person willing to hold it. She was starting to wonder which one she had actually been doing. The cab stopped in front of Ellen's house. She paid. She got out. She shouldered her bag. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, facing the ordinary house on the ordinary street, and she thought about a man who had looked her in the eye and said, "You're not alone behind you anymore," not as a promise, but as a statement of fact, the way you state something that is already true. She had met Lorenzo Moretti 20 hours ago. She had spent 7 years learning that men didn't mean the things they said. She walked up to Ellen's door and knocked, and decided, very carefully, to keep one part of herself open to the possibility that she might be wrong about that. Just one part. For now, what she didn't know, what neither she nor Lorenzo yet understood, was that Raymond had not come to Chicago for territory alone. He had come because of something he had found, something in a file that Sophia had never known existed, something that connected her past and Lorenzo's past in a way that neither of them had ever been told. A name, a date, a single night in a hospital 16 years ago in a city neither of them currently lived in. Raymond Cole knew, and he was going to use it. The name in the file was Julia Moretti. Raymond Cole had found it 14 months ago, buried in a hospital record from a county facility outside of Milwaukee, the kind of record that didn't exist in any digital database because it predated the transition, the kind that lived on microfiche in a basement archive and required someone who knew what they were looking for and had the patience to look. Raymond had the patience. The record was from 16 years ago, an emergency intake. A woman, 23 years old, brought in by a man who had identified himself as her brother. The woman's name was Julia Moretti. The man's name, written in the attending physician's handwriting, in the margin of the intake form, not on the official record, just in the margin. The kind of notation a doctor makes when something feels off. And they want to remember it was Lorenzo. The woman had died 4 days later, internal injuries. The official cause was a car accident, which was what the report said, and what the police had concluded, and what had been filed and closed within 3 weeks. Raymond Cole did not believe in car accidents. He believed in men who made things look like car accidents. He had spent 6 months after finding the record building, a picture of what had actually happened. He had talked to people carefully at a distance, through layers who had been in Milwaukee 16 years ago, who had known the name Julia Moretti, who remembered the man who had brought her in. And what he learned was this: Julia Moretti had not died in a car accident. She had been killed by a man named Donovan Cross, who at that time had been the head of a criminal organization that was in direct competition with the Moretti family for control of the Northern Supply Corridor. Cross had used Julia Lorenzo's younger sister, his only remaining family, as a message. And Lorenzo Moretti had responded to that message in a way that had taken Donovan Cross's entire organization apart at the joints over the following 18 months, quietly and completely, and without a single charge ever being filed. What Raymond now knew, and what he intended to use, was that Lorenzo Moretti had not just reacted to his sister's death. He had covered it. He had pressured the attending physician. He had influenced the police report. He had made sure that the official record said car accident and stayed saying car accident because the alternative, the truth, would have meant an investigation, and an investigation would have meant exposure, and exposure would have meant that Lorenzo's own activities at that time would have come under scrutiny in ways that could have ended everything. Lorenzo Moretti had protected himself by erasing his sister's truth, and Raymond Cole was going to put that truth back in the room. Not because he cared about Julia Moretti. He didn't. He cared about leverage. He cared about the specific power that came from knowing something about a man that the man believed was buried, and deploying that knowledge at the exact moment the man thought he had the upper hand. He made his 5th phone call of the morning. "Set up the meeting," he said. "Not tonight, tomorrow, and make sure Hayes is there." Lorenzo found out about the meeting at 11 a.m. He was at his actual office, not the restaurant, not one of the 3 other front businesses he maintained, but the real office, the one above a dry goods import company on the west side that had been in operation for 22 years and had never had a health code violation or a tax irregularity, because Lorenzo Moretti understood that legitimacy was its own kind of armor. When his head of security, a man named Briggs, walked in with the expression he wore when the information was bad and the options were limited. "Raymond Cole wants a sit-down," Briggs said. Lorenzo set down his pen. "When?" "Tomorrow evening. He's proposing neutral ground, the Ashford Hotel. Conference room. He's been in my city for 10 days and he's asking for a sit-down now." Lorenzo said it as a fact, not a question. "Why now? He knows you know he's here." Briggs set a folder on the desk. "And he knows you know about Sophia." Lorenzo opened the folder. He looked at the contents for a moment. Photographs Sophia's apartment building, the exterior, so taken at 3 different times of day. A printout of a staff file with her name circled, and a single photograph of a woman Lorenzo recognized instantly and had not seen a photograph of in 16 years. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" he said. "One of Cole's men left it with the message, deliberately. He's telling me he knows. He's telling you he has something." Briggs's voice was careful. "And he wants you to come to the table knowing he has it before you sit down." Lorenzo closed the folder. He sat with it for a long moment with the photograph inside it, with the face he hadn't let himself look at directly in 16 years, because looking directly at it meant feeling what had happened to her in a way that was not useful, in a way that could not be channeled into anything productive, in a way that was just grief, pure and unmanageable and his. "He thinks this makes me vulnerable," Lorenzo said. "Doesn't it?" Briggs asked carefully. "It makes me human." Lorenzo pushed the folder to the side. "Which is different." "Lorenzo, I know what I did 16 years ago, Briggs. I know what it cost. I made a decision in a moment when every option was bad and I chose the one that kept the most people safe." He stood up. "Raymond Cole has a file. A file is not a weapon unless you let it become one. He's going to threaten to go public. With what? A margin note on a 16-year-old hospital form." Lorenzo's voice was controlled. "He has a theory, maybe a witness or 2 who'll say what he needs them to say. That's a problem, but it's a manageable problem." He paused. "Sophia is the unmanageable problem, because he's not just using her to get to me. He wants her back." "She knows about Julia?" Briggs asked. "No." Lorenzo picked up his phone. "She knows nothing about my sister. She knows what everyone knows, that I had a sister who died. That's the public version. And if Cole tells her the private version..." Lorenzo stopped. He stood with his phone in his hand, and he thought about a woman in a back office with a first aid kit open between them, telling him about a bag under her bed that she'd repacked every 6 months for 3 years. He thought about the specific courage of that, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that looked like, from the outside, but the daily grinding private kind that didn't ask for recognition because it didn't have time to. "Then I'll tell her myself first," he said. He dialed. Sophia was in Ellen's kitchen when her phone rang. Ellen was her oldest friend in the city, a woman in her mid-50s who had been a social worker for 30 years and had the specific calm of someone who had heard everything and was therefore startled by nothing. She had opened her door that morning with a look on her face that said she understood more than Sophia had told her, and would ask about the rest when it was time, and she had made eggs and coffee and let the silence sit comfortably, which was the most generous thing she could have done. When the phone rang and Sophia looked at the screen, Ellen quietly picked up her coffee cup and took it into the other room. "He's requesting a meeting," Lorenzo said, before she could speak. "Raymond, tomorrow evening." She gripped the phone. "With you? With me, a beat. He knows I know he's here. He wants to negotiate before this becomes something he can't control." "Raymond doesn't negotiate," she said. "Whatever he's offering you in a meeting is a setup." "I know that. Then why would you—" "Because I need to know what he has," Lorenzo said. "What he thinks gives him enough leverage to sit across a table from me. Because whatever it is, I need to understand it before he tries to use it." She was quiet for a moment. "You think he has something on you?" "He has something on me," Lorenzo said. "Yes." A pause, the particular pause of a man deciding not to deflect. "I need to tell you something, before you hear it from him." The kitchen was very quiet. Ellen's house was the kind of quiet that belonged to a person who had intentionally made space for it. "Tell me," Sophia said. And he did. He told her about Julia. Not the public version, the real one. He told it in the same flat, compressed way she had told him about Raymond the day before. The way you tell a thing, when the emotion has been carried so long, it's become structural, part of the load-bearing frame of who you are. He told her about the night Julia was brought to the hospital, about the man who had done it, about the decision he had made in the days after the report, the physician, the file that said car accident, and was allowed to stay saying car accident. He told her what it had cost him. He told her he had never told anyone this. Not in 16 years. When he finished, Sophia sat with it for a long moment. "You're telling me this because Raymond is going to use it against you," she said. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you're accepting help from," he said. "And because I won't let you walk into a situation where someone else controls what you know about me." She closed her eyes. "Did the man who killed her, was he ever—" "He's not a problem anymore," Lorenzo said. "Hasn't been for 15 years. She understood what that meant. She let it settle. "What you did with the report," she said. "You didn't do it to protect yourself from justice for Julia." "No." His voice was quieter. "I did it because the investigation would have led to the man who ordered it, and that man was connected to people I couldn't take apart through a police investigation. I needed it closed and contained so I could handle it the right way. Your way, my way." Another silence. "I'm not going to judge you for that," she said. "I'm not asking. I know you're not asking. I'm telling you." She pressed her thumbnail into her palm, a grounding habit, barely conscious. 7 years with Raymond. There is nothing you could tell me about the choices people make when the system fails them that would surprise me. A beat. "She was your sister. She was my sister," he said. 3 words, so much weight in them. The same weight she heard in her own voice sometimes when she said "my daughter." The weight of everything you'd do and have done and would do again without a second thought. "What do we do about the meeting?" she asked. "I go," he said. "You stay out of it. He'll bring me into it. He'll—" "Let him try." Lorenzo's voice had shifted, not harder exactly, but more settled. The way a man sounds when he has made a decision, and the decision has calmed him. Raymond Cole thinks he walks into that room with 2 weapons. The file on Julia, and the fact that you're vulnerable. I'm gonna walk in knowing about both of them. That changes the math. It changes it how? Because a man with a weapon he thinks is hidden is dangerous. A man whose weapon has already been named out loud is just a man. She thought about that. "You're not worried about the file going public?" "I'm not running for office," he said dryly. And then, more seriously, "If it becomes a problem, I'll handle it. Right now the more important thing is understanding what Raymond actually wants. Because I don't think it's me. He wants Emma," she said. Her daughter's name in her mouth was always a physical thing. "He wants Emma to get to me, and he wants me to destabilize you." "I think that's right," Lorenzo said. "He wants you frightened and isolated and dependent on him. And he wants me busy enough dealing with the fallout from Julia that I can't focus on whatever he's building in my territory." A pause. "He's very smart." "Yes," she said, "he is." "So are you," he said. She almost laughed. "I ran for 3 years and he still found me." "You survived 3 years," he said. "That's not the same as being found. That's being someone who was strong enough to build a life worth finding." She did not say anything to that. She couldn't. There was something in it that went directly past every wall she'd constructed and hit something soft and essential underneath, and she didn't have words for it that were safe to say out loud. "I'll call you after the meeting," he said. "Lorenzo." She stopped him before he could hang up. "Don't go alone. I won't. A beat. Thank you, Sophia." "For what?" "For not running," he said. "Today, when you had every reason to. For staying close enough to fight this." She sat in Ellen's kitchen for a long time after he hung up. She thought about Julia Moretti, a woman she had never known, who had died in a hospital room with her brother's name written in a margin. She thought about what it meant to love someone and lose them to a system that wasn't built for people like you. She thought about Emma in Boston, 13 years old, with people watching over her at this very moment, because a man she'd met 2 days ago had put them there. She thought about Raymond, about his patience, about the 10 days he'd already spent in this city moving his pieces before anyone knew the game had started. And she thought about something she hadn't let herself think in a very long time. She thought about fighting back, not running, not surviving, not building quiet walls and checking deadbolts and disappearing inside a shift. Fighting back. She picked up her phone and called Lorenzo back. He answered on the first ring. "The meeting," she said. "I want to be there. Not in the room, I know, but close." She felt the decision settle into her spine, like something that had been looking for a place to land. "He thinks I'm hiding. He thinks I'm afraid. If he finds out, I'm not. If he walks into that room, knowing you know everything, and I know everything, and neither of us is frightened, that changes his math too." A silence. You said he's smart, she continued. So am I. And I know him in ways you don't. I know how he thinks when a plan starts to slip. I know what he does when he realizes the person he thought was manageable isn't. She paused. I'm useful, Lorenzo. Let me be useful. Another silence. This one different from the others. The Ashford Hotel, he said. There's a restaurant on the ground floor. Caruso will bring you. You'll be at the bar with a phone that has an open line to Briggs. If anything changes, if anything at all feels wrong, you leave immediately. Agreed. I mean it, Sophia. Immediately. I know what immediately means. A beat. Something that might have been the edge of a smile. I know you do. The meeting was set for 8 o'clock. By 6, Raymond Cole was already at the Ashford, which was his habit arrive early. Learn the room. Know where every exit was before the other man sat down. He had a drink at the bar, and he thought about what he was going to say and how he was going to say it, and he was satisfied, in the way he was often satisfied, before things went the way he had planned them. He had the file. He had Victor Hayes in an adjacent room if things needed emphasis. He had a clean exit strategy if Lorenzo refused, which he didn't expect, because men who had something to hide were men who could be managed. He had learned that. What he did not have, what he had not planned for, was Sophia. She was at the far end of the bar when he walked in, and he almost didn't see her, which was the point. She was sitting with a glass of water and her eyes facing forward, and there was something about the set of her shoulders that was different from every version of Sophia he had carried in his memory for 3 years. Not the woman who had learned to be invisible. Not the woman who had packed a bag in the middle of the night. Something else. Something that looked, from across a hotel bar, uncomfortably like someone who had made a decision. He stopped. He stood very still in the middle of the room. And Sophia turned her head and looked directly at him. Not startled, not frightened, not performing the absence of those things the way she used to, the way he had trained her through 7 years of careful, patient work to perform them. She looked at him the way a person looks when they have already decided what comes next, and they are waiting for you to catch up. Raymond Cole was not a man who made mistakes twice. But in that moment, looking across a hotel bar at the woman he had spent 3 years hunting, he felt for the first time, in as long as he could remember, the specific sensation of being behind. He straightened his jacket. He walked toward her. You look well, he said. He kept his voice warm. He was very good at warm. He had always been good at warm. It was the first thing she had loved about him, and the last thing she had stopped believing in. And the fact that it still sounded genuine after everything was either a testament to his skill or a condemnation of it. Raymond, she said. Just his name. Flat, not cold flat, the way she'd said things about him to Lorenzo, the way you say a name when it has run out of power over you. He sat on the stool beside her. She didn't move away. I'm glad you're safe, he said. 3 years, Sophia. I was worried. No, you weren't. A flicker. He controlled it. You took my daughter. I took Emma, she said. She's not a possession. She's my child. She's a person, Sophia said. Her voice was even. A 13-year-old person who spent 7 years watching her father make her mother afraid. And she's safe, and she will stay safe. Raymond studied her. He was recalibrating. She could see him doing it. The tiny adjustments, the way his eyes moved across her face reading for what had changed and why. You've been spending time with Lorenzo Moretti, he said. He's changed the way you talk. I've changed the way I talk, she said. He just gave me room to do it. Raymond leaned on the bar. He's not what you think he is. I know what he is. Do you know about his sister? She held his gaze. Yes, another flicker, longer this time. She watched him process the fact that his opening weapon had already been diffused, and she watched him pivot smooth, practiced, almost seamless to the next one. Then you know he covered up a death, Raymond said. He manipulated a police investigation. He is not a safe man, Sophia. He is not a good man. Neither are you, she said. At least he's honest about it. Raymond's jaw tightened. Just slightly. I'm your husband. You are my husband, she said. That ended the night I left. Not legally. Legally, practically. In every way that matters to me. She picked up her water glass. What do you want, Raymond? You asked for a meeting with Lorenzo. You got one. He's upstairs right now. Why are you down here? Because I wanted to see you first. His voice shifted, dropped into something softer, something that was either genuine or the most convincing imitation of genuine she had ever heard. Sophia, look at me. She looked at him. I made mistakes, he said. I know that. What happened between us, I know it wasn't right. I've had 3 years to think about that. He paused. I just want my family back. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the bag under her bed. The deadbolt checked twice. The working parking lot light she had made a condition of her lease. The 3 years of building something so careful and so quiet that the seams didn't show. She thought about Emma, and she thought, he believes this. That was the thing about Raymond, the thing she had taken the longest to understand. He wasn't performing remorse the way he performed warmth. He was performing what he experienced as remorse, which looked the same from the outside, but was structurally different. Because what Raymond felt was not regret for what he had done, but loss for what he no longer had. He missed his wife and his daughter the way a man misses a wallet he's lost, not because of the wallet, but because of the things inside it that belonged to him. Raymond, she said, I am never coming back. Emma is never coming back. That is not a negotiating position. It's a fact. She set her glass down. If you came to Chicago for territory, talk to Lorenzo. If you came for me, this is my answer, and it's the only answer I'm going to give you. His expression changed. She had seen that change before. The warmth going out of it. The warm was a surface thing, she had known that for years, and when it went, what was underneath was not cold, exactly. It was calculating, precise, the face of a man determining the most efficient path between where he was and what he wanted. You don't understand what I have, he said quietly. What I can do with the Giulia Moretti file. If I take that public, if I take it to the right people, Lorenzo Moretti loses everything. And then where are you? Back to checking deadbolts alone. Or, she said, Lorenzo Moretti takes that file, and everything behind it, and demonstrates to the right people why it tells a different story than you think it does. Because he's had 16 years to make sure anyone who might say otherwise doesn't have anything useful to say anymore. Raymond stared at her. You talked to him about it, he said. He told me himself. And you're defending him. I'm explaining the math, she said. The math you got wrong. Raymond was very still. It was the stillness she remembered from the worst moments, the held breath stillness before he decided what came next. She had spent years learning to read it, to find the exit in the seconds before it broke. She didn't move. She didn't look away. She was not the woman who looked away anymore. Victor, Raymond said, not to her, louder, into the room. She heard movement behind her. She didn't turn. She kept her eyes on Raymond. You brought Hayes into a hotel bar, she said. You're going to make a scene in a public place. I'm going to ask you to stand up, Raymond said, calmly, and come with me. And we're going to have a different kind of conversation. No, Sophia, no, she said it again without raising her voice. And if Victor Hayes takes one more step toward me, this entire hotel finds out exactly who Raymond Cole is and what he came to Chicago to do. She paused. I'm not bluffing. I haven't been bluffing once since you sat down. Victor Hayes stopped. Raymond looked at her, and for the first time in 7 years of marriage and 3 years of being hunted, Sophia Bennett looked at Raymond Cole and watched him understand, really understand. In the calculating center of him, where the warmth never reached, that the woman sitting at this bar was not the woman he had been looking for. That woman was gone. This one was something else. And then Lorenzo Moretti walked into the bar. He hadn't been upstairs. She realized that the moment she saw him, he had never gone upstairs, or he had, and come back, or the meeting upstairs had been Briggs, and he had been here, in this hotel, close enough to move if he needed to. He walked to the bar with that particular economy of movement that was starting to feel familiar to her, and he stood beside her chair without touching her, and he looked at Raymond Cole with the expression she now recognized as his most dangerous one, the one that looked like nothing at all. Raymond, he said. Lorenzo. Raymond had recovered. He was always fast. Interesting choice of companion. She's not my companion, Lorenzo said. She's my employee. And my guest. And someone who just handled a difficult conversation a great deal more effectively than most people I know. He paused. Our meeting was upstairs. You're down here. Which tells me the meeting you planned isn't the one you want to have anymore. Raymond looked at him, then at Sophia, then back. The file, he said. Is a file, Lorenzo said. About a woman I loved more than anything in my life and failed to protect and have thought about every single day for 16 years. Something moved through his voice, not weakness, but the specific gravity of truth. You thought it was a weapon. It was never a weapon. It was my worst moment, and I'm not going to negotiate with my worst moment. The bar was quiet around them. A couple 2 stools down had gone very still in the way people go still when they can feel that something significant is happening, without knowing exactly what. You have nothing, Raymond said. His voice had changed. The calculation behind it was showing through. I have everything, Lorenzo said. And you have a choice. You can take what you came here for, the territorial expansion, which I've already had conversations about, which is manageable, and you can leave Sophia and her daughter completely out of it. Or, he let the word hang, you can push this, and I will push back in ways that are not manageable. Raymond looked at him for a long time. He looked at Sophia. She met his eyes. She thought about the bag under her bed, and the deadbolt, and the working parking lot light. She thought about 3 years of waiting for this moment, and not knowing it was what she was waiting for, not rescue, not someone to fight Raymond for her, but a room in which she could say her piece and have someone standing beside her while she said it. Not behind her, beside her. Raymond Cole straightened his jacket. He looked once more at Sophia, the calculating look, the inventory look, the look she had spent years dreading, and for the first time she watched it land on nothing. There was nothing left for it to find, nothing frightened, nothing uncertain, nothing available. This isn't finished, he said. It is in this city, Lorenzo said. Go home, Raymond. 3 words, the same 3 words. A different man, a different room, the same absolute certainty. Raymond turned. Victor Hayes fell into step behind him. They walked out of the bar. The door closed. Sophia set both hands flat on the bar and breathed. Just breathed. Lorenzo sat down on the stool Raymond had vacated. He didn't say anything for a moment. The bartender, reading something in the atmosphere with professional accuracy, moved to the other end of the bar. You were supposed to stay at the bar, Lorenzo said. I did stay at the bar. You were supposed to stay quiet and observe. He came to me first. She turned to look at him. I handled it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, not the edge of a smile this time, but the whole thing, brief and real, gone almost as soon as it arrived. Yes, he said, you did. She looked at the door Raymond had walked through. He said it's not finished, she said. He's right, Lorenzo said. It's not. He still has people in this city. He still has the file, for whatever it's worth. He's still Raymond Cole. A pause. But tonight he walked out of that bar without you. And he knows now who he's actually dealing with. That changes everything. Does it? She wasn't being pessimistic. She was being accurate. Men like Raymond don't change their minds. They change their tactics. Then we change ours, he said. She noticed it. She let it be there, without examining it too closely. My daughter, she said, still covered. Caruso's contact in Boston confirms she's fine. He looked at her. We need to talk about bringing her somewhere you can see her. When this is more stable, something in her chest that had been clenched for 3 years loosened. She turned toward the bar. She looked at her water glass. She thought about Emma in Boston, 13 and safe, and not knowing that tonight her mother had sat down across from her father without flinching. She thought about what she would tell her, how she would explain that there was a difference between surviving and living, and that tonight she had crossed some invisible line between the two. She hadn't crossed it because Lorenzo Moretti had stood beside her. She had crossed it because she had already crossed it before he walked in. He had just given her the room. Lorenzo, she said. Still here. Thank you. She said it simply. The way you say a thing when you mean all of it and don't need to explain the parts. He was quiet for a moment. You thanked me last night too, he said. In the office. You keep doing things worth thanking. So do you. He turned to look at her directly. What you said to him. About Emma. About not coming back. He paused. That wasn't easy. No, she said. It was the easiest thing I've done in 7 years. She met his eyes. That's the thing about decisions you've already made in your heart. Saying them out loud is just catching up. He held her gaze. And in the quiet of the hotel bar, with the ordinary world moving around them, and Raymond Cole walking somewhere out into the Chicago night to recalculate, and Victor Hayes following him and Emma safe in Boston, and a bag under a bed that maybe, didn't need to be quite so ready anymore, Lorenzo Moretti looked at Sophia Bennett the way he had looked at her the night before in the dining room, like she was the most important person in the room. And this time she let herself look back. Raymond Cole did not go home. That was the first thing Lorenzo found out the morning after the hotel bar, when Briggs came into the office at 7:45 with coffee he hadn't been asked to bring, and an expression that meant the coffee was a softening gesture. He's still in the city, Briggs said. Lorenzo set down his pen. Where? West Side. A property registered to a shell company that traces back to one of Victor Hayes's import fronts. Briggs set a folder on the desk, a different folder from yesterday's, which was already a bad sign. He made 3 calls last night after leaving the hotel. One to Dennis Marsh, logistics man, works the Midwest corridor. One to a lawyer named Gould, who specializes in family court. Lorenzo looked up from the folder. Family court. Emma, Briggs said. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Lorenzo sat back. He turned the word over. He thought about a 13-year-old girl in Boston who did not know that her father was in Chicago, consulting a family court attorney at 9 o'clock the night after he'd failed to reclaim her mother. He's going to file for custody, Lorenzo said. Emergency petition. He can claim Sophia is an unfit parent, unstable living situation, association with known criminal organizations. Briggs paused deliberately on the last part. Meaning you, Lorenzo was quiet. He planned this before the hotel, he said. It was not a question. The meeting was never about territory or the file. It was to confirm Sophia wouldn't cooperate. Once he had that confirmation, he already had the attorney on standby. The territorial push is real, Briggs said, but it's secondary. Sophia is the primary, because if he gets Emma, Sophia comes to him. Briggs said it flatly. Or she spends the next decade in family court, fighting a man with unlimited resources. Either way, she's occupied. Either way, she's not building anything. And either way, you're the reason it happened. Your name attached to her life is the ammunition he uses to make her look unstable. Lorenzo stood up. He walked to the window, not to look at anything, just to move, because staying still with this information felt like accepting it. He had made a mistake, not in the hotel bar, not in bringing Sophia close. The mistake had been in believing that Raymond Cole's primary calculation was territory. Territory was what men like Raymond said when they wanted to sit across a table from a man like Lorenzo. The real calculation had always been Sophia and Emma, and the specific cruelty of using a child as a lever on her mother. He had underestimated the depth of it. He would not do that again. He turned back from the window. Get me the attorney's name. Full background. I want to know every case Gould has filed in the past 5 years, every client, every outcome. He picked up his phone. And I need to know the exact timeline for an emergency custody petition in Illinois. How fast he can move it. Already on it, Briggs said. Lorenzo was already dialing Sophia's number. She picked up on the second ring. What happened? Not a question. She had been waiting for his call the way a person waits when they know the other shoe is in the air. He told her. The silence on her end, last second, he counted them, the way she had counted Raymond's silences, before she understood what they meant. Emma, she said, very quietly. He won't get her, Lorenzo said. You can't promise I can, he said. Listen to me. A custody petition requires a hearing. A hearing requires a judge. A judge requires evidence. And the evidence he's planning to use your association with me only works if I allow it to look the way he needs it to look. A pause. I'm not going to allow that. What does that mean? It means we get ahead of it today. Before he files, he paused. I need you to trust me for about 6 more hours. A silence. He understood what that silence cost her. Trust for Sophia was not a small word. It was a word she had spent years rebuilding from the ground up, brick by careful brick, and handing it to someone new even for 6 hours was an act of will that most people would not recognize as the courage it actually was. 6 hours, she said. 6 hours, he confirmed. And then you will have every piece of information, and every decision will be yours. Where do I need to be? Stay at Ellen's for now. I'll have Caruso bring you to the restaurant at noon. He paused. How are you? She made a small sound, not quite a laugh. I'm the mother of a 13-year-old girl that a man is trying to use as a weapon. How do you think I am? I think you're furious, he said. And I think furious is the right response. It is, she said. Don't waste it. Use it. He found himself looking at his phone after she hung up, at the screen going dark, and thinking that he had known a great many people in his life who were formidable, who could hold a room, hold a situation, hold themselves under pressure in ways that others couldn't. He had met very few who could do all of it while their heart was being leveraged against them. The next 4 hours moved fast. Lorenzo made 7 phone calls. The most important was the 4th, to a woman named Catherine Reeves, who had been one of the most effective family law attorneys in Illinois for 25 years, and who had, on 2 previous occasions, helped people connected to Lorenzo's world navigate situations that required both legal precision and a certain discretion about the details that led to them. Catherine listened to the situation in full. She asked 12 questions, the last of which was, is the home environment stable? She's been at a friend's for 2 days due to a safety concern, Lorenzo said. Her own apartment is. I need stable, Catherine said. Judges making emergency decisions look at immediate circumstances. If she's displaced, then we address that, Lorenzo said. What does she need? Catherine told him. He made 2 more calls. Then he called Briggs. The apartment on Lakeview, he said. The one we keep for yes. Get it cleaned. Get groceries in it. Get it looking lived in by 11 a.m. Briggs paused. You're relocating her. I'm giving her options, Lorenzo said. She decides. Lorenzo. Briggs's voice had the particular quality it got when he was going to say something his boss might not want to hear. You understand that putting Sophia Bennett in a Moretti property is it's exactly what Cole is going to point to. It looks like I know what it looks like, Lorenzo said. Which is why Catherine is going to help us make it look like something else. A property held in trust, a fair market rental, paper trail that has nothing to do with me directly. He paused. Raymond expects me to hide, to step back from Sophia because my visibility hurts her case. He's counting on that. And instead, I'm going to be the most boring, legitimate, above-board landlord in Cook County, Lorenzo said. Every piece of paper clean, every connection documented and explainable. Nothing Raymond can use because there's nothing there to use. Briggs was quiet for a moment. That's going to take every favor you have with Alderman. I know what it's going to take. Another pause. You like her. She's my employee, Lorenzo. Make the calls, Briggs. Sophia arrived at the restaurant at noon to find it was closed for the lunch service, unusual because Moretti's didn't close for lunch, and Lorenzo was waiting at the bar with Catherine Reeves. A tall woman in her 60s with reading glasses, pushed up on her head, and the particular brisk efficiency of someone who had not wasted a moment of her professional life. Sophia shook her hand. I've reviewed the situation, Catherine said, without preamble, which Sophia immediately appreciated. Raymond Cole can file an emergency custody petition. However, for an emergency petition to succeed, he needs to demonstrate immediate danger to the child. Emma is currently in Boston in a stable supervised environment you arranged that's actually in your favor. She set a folder on the bar. His angle is going to be parental fitness, specifically, your living situation, your employment stability, and your associations. My associations meaning Lorenzo, Sophia said. Yes. Catherine looked at her directly. How much of your history does he know? Everything, Sophia said. 7 years of everything. Does he have documentation of any of it? I never filed a police report, Sophia said it without flinching. I know, believe me, I know. I'm not judging that, Catherine said. I'm assessing. No police reports means no official record on his side either. Which means a judge is looking at a he said she said between a woman who disappeared and a man who's been looking for her. A pause. We need to change that picture before he files. We need to get your story on record first. How? A victim's advocate report through the state attorney's office. Today, if possible. It won't be perfect, it's fast-tracked, and Raymond's attorney will challenge it, but it establishes a timeline. It puts your account in front of a judge before Raymond's account gets there. Catherine closed the folder. It requires you to tell the full story, everything, to a state advocate and potentially a judge. Sophia was quiet. She had not told the full story to anyone, not in 3 years. She had told pieces to the shelter in Milwaukee, to the social worker who had helped her build the new identity, to Ellen in incomplete installments over long evenings. She had never told it in order, from the beginning, to someone writing it down. Okay, she said. Catherine looked at her. It's not a comfortable process. I know, it may take several hours. I know. Sophia met her eye. Let's go. Lorenzo stood up from the bar stool. I'll drive you. You don't need to. I know I don't need to, he said. The same way he'd said, I know what it's going to take to Briggs that morning. With the quiet certainty of a man who had made the decision and found it simple. She looked at him. The apartment, Catherine said, gathering her things. I'll send you the documents this afternoon, Sophia. Review them carefully. The rental is legitimate fair market rate, nothing unusual. It gives you a stable address for the court record. I can pay my own rent, Sophia said immediately. Of course, Catherine said, without blinking. I'll have the lease drawn up. Sophia looked at Lorenzo. He was already at the door, jacket on, keys in hand, looking at her with the particular patience of a man who has learned that waiting is not the same as disappearing. She picked up her bag. She followed him to the door. You arranged all of this in 4 hours, she said, as they walked out. 3.5, he said. Lorenzo, don't thank me again, he said. You've thanked me enough for 1 week. I was going to say it's too much, she said. He stopped. He turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression she was still learning to read, not the cold public face, not the carefully managed warmth he used in professional situations, but the third thing, the thing underneath both of those, which was quieter and more complicated, and felt more true. Is it, he said, Or is it just more than you're used to? She stood on the sidewalk outside his restaurant, her bag on her shoulder, the city going about its ordinary business around her. She thought about the difference between those two things. Too much, or just more than she was used to. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Fair enough, he said, and he started walking toward the car. The state advocate's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, and the woman who interviewed Sophia was named Denise, and she was 40-something, direct, and had the particular quality of someone who had heard a great many difficult stories and had not become numb to any of them. Sophia sat across from her and told it. She told it from the beginning. Third month, the bank account, the first time. She told it in order, which was harder than telling pieces, because order meant experiencing it as a continuous thing rather than isolated incidents, and isolated incidents were manageable. A continuous thing was a life, and she had spent 3 years not thinking of it as a life, but as a series of moments she had survived. Telling it in order made it a life. She did not stop. She did not break down. She stopped twice to breathe deliberately, with the conscious technique she had learned somewhere in the first year of her new life, and then she continued. Denise wrote. She asked questions with the precision of a person building a document, not probing for drama. When it was done, Sophia sat in the chair, with her hands in her lap, and a strange lightness behind her sternum, like something that had been under pressure for a long time, had been carefully, correctly released. That was thorough, Denise said, and very clear. You present well. Thank you. I mean it as a legal compliment, Denise said. In a he-said, she-said situation, how you present matters to a judge. You present as credible and self-possessed. She paused. Raymond Cole is going to try to use your association with Lorenzo Moretti to paint a picture of an unstable environment. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Sophia said. And for what it's worth, I've known Lorenzo Moretti for 4 days. He is my employer, and he stepped in when I needed help. That is the extent of it. Denise looked at her for a moment with the practiced neutrality of someone deciding whether to say something. Whatever the extent of it, she said carefully, the picture matters more than the reality in a courtroom. Make sure the picture is clean, Sophia nodded. She rode the elevator back down to the lobby, where Lorenzo was waiting. He had stayed. Of course he had stayed. She had stopped being surprised by this, and she sat down in the chair beside him and said nothing for a moment. Done, he asked. Done, she said. How do you feel? She thought about it honestly, like I just put something down that I'd been carrying. For so long I forgot it wasn't part of my body. He was quiet for a moment. That's a good way to put it. She said the picture matters more than the reality, Sophia said. In a courtroom, about us, she turned to look at him. She meant you and me. I know what she meant. You need to step back, Sophia said. Publicly. Whatever this is. It can't look like anything in front of a judge. Lorenzo turned to look at her. His expression was careful, and she was getting better at reading careful, at reading the difference between careful because he's hiding and careful because he's choosing words that are actually true. Whatever this is, he said. Lorenzo, you're right, he said. Publicly, we are employer and employee. I assisted you in a difficult situation, and that assistance is fully documented and appropriate. A pause. Privately is a different conversation. When Emma is safe. When Raymond is out of your life in every way that matters. He held her gaze. But that conversation exists. I want you to know that. She looked at him. She thought about Ellen's kitchen, and a card behind her license, and 3 years of carefully not wanting anything that could be taken from her. I know, she said. Raymond filed the petition at 4:17 p.m. Catherine called Sophia with the news at 4:22, which meant she had been waiting for it, which meant she had been right about the timeline, which meant it was already in motion. We expected this, Catherine said. We're ready. The advocate's report was filed at 2 p.m. We have 2 hours on him in the court record. That matters. A pause. Sophia, he's also requested an emergency hearing. The judge granted a preliminary conference for Friday. That's 3 days, Sophia said. 3 days, Catherine confirmed. In which time I need you in that Lakeview apartment. Stable address. Stable employment. Lorenzo is prepared to provide documentation of your position and your track record at the restaurant. And I need Emma. A silence. Bring her here, Sophia said. To Chicago? To you, Catherine said. A mother and daughter who've been separated for safety reasons. Now reuniting because the threat has been addressed, and the mother has established a stable environment. That's the picture we want a judge to see on Friday. Not a woman in hiding, a woman who came home. Sophia pressed the phone against her ear. She was in the back of Caruso's car, headed back to Ellen's to pack. Emma's going to be scared, she said. She might be, Catherine agreed. She also might be 13 years old and tougher than you expect. A beat, Sophia almost smiled. You don't know Emma. No. But I know her mother, and children of women like you tend to know more than we give them credit for. Sophia thought about her daughter. She thought about brown eyes, and a stubborn jaw, and the specific kind of quiet that a child develops when they've learned to read the temperature of a room before they walk into it. She thought about Emma at 3 a.m., in the back seat of a car on a November night 3 years ago, not asking questions. Just watching the highway pass and trusting her mother without being asked to. 13 years old and tougher than you expect. Call the contact in Boston, Sophia told Caruso, without lowering the phone. Tell them Emma is coming home. Caruso glanced at her in the rearview mirror and nodded. Catherine, Sophia said, tell me exactly what Friday looks like. The next 3 days had a quality Sophia had not experienced before, not quite calm, not quite crisis, but the charged in-between of something that had been set in motion and had not yet arrived. She moved into the Lakeview apartment on the first evening. It was clean and quiet and had a working parking lot light, which she noticed and which made something in her chest do a complicated thing she chose not to examine too closely. She unpacked her bag, the 3-year bag, the emergency bag, for the first time since she had packed it. She took out the cash and put it in the kitchen drawer. She took out the change of clothes and put it in the dresser. She took out the ID and put it in her wallet, next to her license where the card had been. The card was still there. She had moved it to her front pocket 3 days ago. She hadn't examined why. Emma arrived on a Thursday afternoon, a flight from Boston, accompanied by a woman named Joan, who had been running the shelter there and who had, over 3 years, become something between a guardian and an aunt to a girl who needed both. Sophia was at the airport. She saw Emma before Emma saw her, a teenager, moving through a crowd with a duffel bag on one shoulder, and that particular posture of a person who has learned to take up a little less space than they need. And then Emma looked up and saw her mother, and the posture changed completely. She crossed the distance between them at a dead run. So, Sophia caught her. She held her daughter taller than 3 years ago, harder in the shoulders, a voice that had dropped half a register since they'd last been in the same room, and she pressed her face into Emma's hair and stayed there for a long time. Mom, Emma said, muffled. You're squeezing. I know, Sophia said. She didn't stop. Emma laughed, a real one, not careful, not managed. Just her daughter's laugh, which Sophia had replayed in her memory approximately 10,000 times over 3 years, and which the memory had not gotten exactly right, had not captured the specific catch at the end of it. The way it always sounded a little like it surprised her. Is it over? Emma asked, when Sophia finally loosened her hold enough for them to look at each other. Sophia looked at her daughter's face, brown eyes, stubborn jaw. 13 years old, and already carrying the vocabulary of a person who had learned the difference between over and safe. Not completely, she said, but we're fighting it now. Openly, with help. Emma processed this with the focused calm of someone assessing a situation. What kind of help? A good attorney, the right documentation, and a man who owns a restaurant where I work. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. A man, my employer, Sophia said. Mom, Emma. A beat. Is he nice? Emma asked. Sophia thought about a card placed on a desk instead of placed in a hand. She thought about are you hurt? Asked, like the answer mattered. She thought about you're not alone behind you anymore, said as a fact. He's yes, she said. He's nice, in the way that people are nice when they don't need anything from you for it. Emma considered this with the solemnity of someone taking notes. Okay, she said. Okay, I want to meet him, Emma said. Sophia looked at her daughter, this person she had built and protected and driven through the night for, and repacked a bag for every 6 months for 3 years, and felt something settle into place inside her that had been slightly, persistently out of alignment for longer than she could accurately measure. You will, she said. Lorenzo came to the restaurant the next morning, Friday, the day of the preliminary conference, and he found Sophia already there, 2 hours before her shift, sitting at the bar with a coffee and a folder of documents Catherine had sent over. He sat down across from her. Ready? He asked, almost. She looked up from the folder. Emma wants to meet you. He was quiet for a moment. How is she? She's 13, Sophia said. So she handled the flight, and the reunion, and the new apartment, and the fact that her father is trying to get custody of her, all in about 48 hours, and what she is currently most concerned about is whether the apartment has decent Wi-Fi. Lorenzo's expression moved toward something warm. Does it? Apparently yes, which I'm told is the most important thing. Sophia closed the folder. She asked if you were nice. What did you say? She met his eyes. I said yes. He held her gaze for a moment. Just a moment. Then he looked at the folder. Catherine has everything she needs. Everything. A pause. Lorenzo, if this goes badly today, if Raymond's attorney is better than we think, if the judge then we go to the next step, he said. There is always a next step. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, he said. It's just true. Raymond's only advantage is making you feel like there are no more steps. Like every option leads back to him. He looked at her steadily. Every option doesn't lead back to him. That's the lie he needs you to believe. She looked at him across the bar, across the white tablecloths, and the amber light that was softer in the morning, the restaurant that she had walked into for 3 years as a place to disappear, and that had become, somehow, in the last 4 days, the place where everything changed. I used to be afraid to want things, she said, not because wanting was dangerous, because losing what you wanted was how he got you. He waited until you wanted something, and then he took it. Lorenzo said nothing. He was listening with the full attention of someone who understands that not every sentence needs a response. I want this, she said. Emma here. This apartment. This job. She paused. I want things again. And I know that's not the smart. It's exactly the smart thing, he said. Wanting something is not the same as giving someone control over it. Raymond taught you those were the same. They're not. She picked up her coffee. She looked at him. The hearing is at 2, she said. I know. You're not going to be there. Catherine will be there. You'll be there. Emma will be with Joan at the apartment. He paused. I'll be here, in case you need something after. And if I don't need something after, then you don't, he said. And that's fine too. She held his gaze for a long time. Then Raymond Cole walked through the front door of Moretti's restaurant. He walked in like he owned it, which was his habit, and he stopped when he saw them at the bar, Sophia and Lorenzo, sitting across from each other, with coffee and a folder, and no visible alarm at his entrance, and something that moved across his face that was the emotional equivalent of a man arriving at a chessboard to find the pieces arranged differently than he'd left them. Restaurants closed, Lorenzo said. I'm not here for food, Raymond said. He looked at Sophia. I heard Emma arrived. Sophia's hand tightened on her coffee cup. She set it down. You've been watching the airport, she said. I like to know what's happening. Raymond's voice was measured. Still controlled. Sophia, the petition is filed. The hearing is this afternoon. This can still be simple. You come home. Emma comes home. The petition disappears, and nobody has to sit in front of a judge. I'm not coming home, she said. We've had this conversation. You don't have a strong case. You should leave, Lorenzo said. I'm talking to my wife. You're talking to my employee, Lorenzo said. In my restaurant, which is closed. He stood up, not threateningly, just standing with that complete economy of movement that communicated everything without performing anything. And I'm going to ask you to leave now, Raymond, because the next request is going to be less of a request. Raymond looked at him. The calculation was running. She could see it. She had always been able to see it. The thing behind his eyes that was always counting. He looked at Sophia. After the hearing, he said, when this doesn't go the way you're hoping, remember that I gave you the chance to make it simple. Get out of my restaurant, Lorenzo said, very quietly. Raymond turned. He straightened his jacket. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on it. 16 years ago, he said, without turning around. A hospital outside Milwaukee. There are people who remember more than a margin note. I want you to know I still have that. He walked out. The door closed. Sophia looked at Lorenzo. His jaw was set. His expression was controlled in the way that required actual effort. She could see the effort, which was the first time she'd seen him need it. He's going to use Julia in the hearing, she said. He's going to try. Lorenzo turned back from the door. His voice had returned to even. Catherine knows. She's prepared for it. Lorenzo, Sophia. He looked at her. I told you I made a decision 16 years ago that I have lived with. I'm still living with it. Raymond using it in a family court hearing does not change what I decided then or what I decide now. He met her eyes. What I decide now is that you win this hearing. That's where I'm putting my attention. She looked at him. She thought about a man who had walked into a restaurant 4 days ago without knowing what he was walking into, who had looked at a woman in a wine-stained uniform and asked one question 4 words and meant them. She thought about everything that had happened in 4 days. The speed of it. The way a life could change direction in the time it took to pack a bag and make a phone call, and for the first time in years, to let someone stand beside you. The hearing was in 4 hours. Emma was in the Lakeview apartment with Joan and decent Wi-Fi. Catherine had a 2-hour lead in the court record. And Raymond Cole had just walked out of Moretti's restaurant for the second time without what he came for. She picked up her coffee. She opened her folder. "Tell me something," she said. "What?" "When this is over," she said. "The hearing, Raymond. All of it. When it's actually over." She looked up at him. "What does your restaurant need in a manager?" Lorenzo went very still. Then something crossed his face, slow and real and entirely unguarded, the way expressions look when they arrive before the person has time to manage them. "Why?" he said. "Because I've been running this floor for 3 years," she said. "And I know every table, every supplier, every server's schedule, and every customer's preference, and everything that should be different and isn't." She held his gaze. "And because I'm done being the person who disappears inside the shift. I want to be the person who runs it." Lorenzo looked at her for a long time. "The job is yours," he said. "It has been since Monday." "I just didn't know how to ask." She held his gaze. Then she looked back down at her folder. "Good," she said. "Now let's talk about Friday." The hearing started at 2 o'clock, and Raymond Cole's attorney walked in with a folder 3 inches thick. Sophia saw it from across the courtroom and felt her stomach drop exactly once, and then she made herself breathe. And then she looked at Catherine Reeves, sitting beside her, and Catherine was already looking at the folder with the expression of a woman who had seen 3-inch folders before and was not afraid of them. "Let him have his folder," Catherine said quietly. "I have a timeline." The judge was a woman named Harriet Walsh, mid-60s, silver-haired, with the particular economy of expression that comes from 20 years of hearing people tell their worst truths in public and deciding what to do about them. She had read the pre-filed documents before the hearing. Sophia could tell by the way she looked at Raymond's attorney when he stood up, not with fresh attention but with the measured attention of someone confirming what they already suspected. Raymond's attorney, the man named Gould, was good. Sophia had expected him to be good. He laid the argument cleanly. A mother who had relocated without the father's knowledge or consent, who had placed a child in an unofficial shelter arrangement for 3 years, without stable address or formal schooling documentation, who was currently residing in a property connected, however indirectly, to a man with known criminal associations. He said Lorenzo's name twice. He said it carefully, with a pause after each time, giving it space to land. Judge Walsh wrote something down. Then Catherine stood up. She did not match Gould's volume or his pace. She was quieter, and about 30% faster, and she laid the counter-argument the way a mason lays brick, no flourish. No drama, one piece at a time with complete precision. The advocate's report filed 2 hours before the petition. The documented timeline of abuse, beginning in the 3rd month of the marriage, continuing for 7 years. The November night the drive, the shelter in Milwaukee, the professional supervision under which Emma had lived for 3 years is a safe and stable environment, with consistent schooling and documented wellness checks. Then the residency question. The Lakeview apartment. Lease in Sophia's name, fair market rate, no structural connection to any criminal organization, documentation complete and clean and available for the court's review in full. Then Lorenzo, Mr. Moretti, Catherine said, is my client's employer. He is documented as such for 3 years. When my client experienced a workplace incident involving a man with connections to her abuser, Mr. Moretti intervened appropriately and facilitated access to legal counsel and safe housing. That is the entirety and the nature of that association. Any suggestion that this connection renders my client's home environment unstable requires the petitioner to demonstrate actual harm which he cannot, because there is none. Gould stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Moretti's professional history is not on trial, Judge Walsh said. Proceed, Ms. Reeves. Sophia sat with her hands flat on the table in front of her and did not allow her expression to change, which took everything she had. Catherine laid down the final piece. My client has maintained employment at the same establishment for 3 years. She has never missed a rent payment. She has never had a legal complaint filed against her in any jurisdiction. She left a dangerous marriage with her child to protect that child, and she has spent 3 years building a life that is stable, documented, and appropriate. Catherine looked at the judge. The petitioner has filed an emergency custody motion. Emergencies require emergencies. There is no emergency here. There is a mother who protected her daughter, and a father who is using the court system to punish her for it. The room was very quiet. Judge Walsh looked at Gould. Gould opened his folder, and Raymond Cole, sitting 2 tables away in a charcoal suit with his hands folded and his expression perfectly neutral, looked across at Sophia for exactly 1 second. She looked back. She did not look away. Gould used Julia. Sophia had been waiting for it, and it still hit her like something physical when he said the name said it, with the careful weight of a man deploying a weapon he's been sharpening for months. He laid it out with documentation, the hospital record, the margin notation, the inconsistencies in the official police report. He had a witness statement from a former Milwaukee police officer, now retired, who claimed to have been pressured 16 years ago to close the investigation quickly. He said it slowly, and he said it clearly, and he let it sit in the courtroom air. The man in whose property my client's child would potentially reside, Gould said, manipulated a death investigation, pressured law enforcement, buried the truth of how his own sister died. Your Honor, if this is the environment, Ms. Reeves, Judge Walsh said. Catherine stood up, Your Honor. This testimony concerns events 16 years ago in a separate jurisdiction and has no demonstrated connection to current child welfare. She paused. Furthermore, if the petitioner wishes to introduce allegations of criminal conduct by a third party, he is required to demonstrate that this conduct creates a present danger to the child. He cannot do so. Mr. Moretti does not reside with my client. He is her employer, a beat. I'd also note that the petitioner himself has documented business connections to individuals currently under federal investigation for racketeering in 3 states. If we are evaluating the character of individuals in each party's orbit, I'm prepared to go first. The folder in Gould's hand shifted, just slightly. But Sophia saw it, and she understood in the way you understand things that happen faster than thought that Catherine had something real, that the 6 hours Lorenz spent making phone calls on the morning after the hotel bar had not only been about the apartment and the attorney and the advocate's report. He had been building something else too. Judge Walsh looked at Gould for a long moment. Counsel, she said, are you prepared to proceed on the racketeering allegation your opposing counsel has referenced? Gould looked at Raymond. Raymond's expression did not change. His hands stayed folded. But something in the quality of his stillness had shifted. She knew that shift. She had been reading it for 7 years, from the stillness of a man in control to the stillness of a man holding on. We'd need time to respond to that, Your Honor, Gould said. I'm sure you would, Judge Walsh said. She looked at her notes. She looked at Sophia. And Sophia sat in that courtroom with her hands flat on the table and her spine straight and thought about a November night 3 years ago when she had driven in the dark with her daughter asleep in the back seat. And she had not looked in the rearview mirror because she couldn't afford to. She was looking forward now, only forward. The emergency custody petition, Judge Walsh said, is denied. I find no evidence of immediate danger to the child and significant evidence of parental fitness on the part of the mother. She looked at Raymond's table with the expression of a woman who has formed a view and chosen her words carefully. I will note for the record that the circumstances that led to this relocation as documented in the advocate's report filed prior to this petition reflect a pattern of conduct by the petitioner that this court takes seriously. She set down her papers. Standard custody proceedings may be initiated through the proper channels. This emergency petition is closed. The gavel came down. Sophia sat very still for 1 second. Then Catherine put her hand over Sophia's on the table and said quietly, "You did it." Sophia looked at her. "We did it," she said. Raymond was gone by the time they walked out of the courtroom. Not gone from Chicago, not yet, but gone from that hallway, that building, that immediate vicinity, which was its own kind of statement. A man who had spent 10 days positioning himself for a single move, and the move had failed, and what remained now was the reckoning of a man who had to recalculate without showing the recalculation. Sophia stood in the hallway with Catherine and felt the afternoon air from an open window at the end of the corridor and thought, it is not over. Raymond would file through standard channels. He would try again. He would be slower and more careful, and he would come at it from an angle she hadn't anticipated. But she also thought, I will be ready, every time, because she was not the woman who disappeared side of it anymore. She was not the woman who checked the deadbolt twice and counted it as victory. She was the woman who had walked into a courtroom and let her story be heard in order from the beginning and had watched it stand up. She called Lorenzo from the hallway. He picked up before the first ring finished. Well, denied, she said. A silence. Catherine was extraordinary, she said. She always is. Another beat. And you? I was there, she said. I stayed in my seat, and I didn't look at him, and when Gould said Julia's name, She stopped. I'm sorry. That must have... It's all right, he said. His voice was quiet. It needed to be said out loud in a room. Maybe it was time. She stood in the hallway with the phone against her ear and thought about things that needed to be said in rooms and the specific courage of allowing that. Come to the restaurant, he said. Bring Emma. Emma had never been to Moretti's. She walked in beside her mother at 4:30 in the afternoon, when the dinner service was 2 hours away, and the restaurant had the particular quiet of a place that was about to become something. The low hum of preparation, the smell of garlic and good olive oil, the sound of Marco giving instructions somewhere in the kitchen that drifted through the swing door in fragments. Lorenzo was at the bar. He stood when they came in. Emma looked at him with the focused assessment of a teenager who has learned to take inventory of adults before deciding how to treat them. Sophia watched her daughter read Lorenzo the way she had once taught her to read a room exits, temperature, intent. Then Emma looked at her mother. Then she looked back at Lorenzo. You own this place? She said. I do, he said. Mom's been working here for 3 years and you never talked to her? A beat. Lorenzo looked at Sophia. Something moved through his expression that was half apology and entirely sincere. That's true. And it's something I should have corrected earlier. Emma considered this. Okay, she said, that's a fair answer. Sophia looked at her daughter, 13 years old, and already conducting accountability conversations with a man twice her age. She thought, I did something right. Lorenzo looked at Emma with the careful attention of a man who understood that this introduction mattered more than any of the others he had navigated in the past week. Your mother told me you're interested in... He started. I want to see the kitchen, Emma said. Lorenzo blinked. Then the full smile, the real one, the one that arrived before he could manage it, came and stayed this time. Marco, he called toward the kitchen. The swing door opened. Marco appeared, round-faced and permanently optimistic. Yeah? Emma would like a kitchen tour. Marco looked at Emma. Emma looked at Marco with the solemn focus of someone about to inspect something important. You know how to make pasta? Marco asked. No, Emma said. Good, Marco said. Fresh start. Come on. Emma followed him through the swing door without a backward glance, and Sophia stood at the bar and listened to her daughter's voice, mixing with Marco's through the door, and felt something settle in her chest so completely that for a moment she couldn't speak. Lorenzo sat down at the bar. She sat beside him. She's extraordinary, he said. I know, Sophia said. She gets it from somewhere. She looked at him sideways. That was almost smooth. Almost, he agreed. They sat together in the quiet of the empty restaurant. Outside, Chicago went about its afternoon trucks and cabs, and the particular sound of a city that doesn't pause for anyone's crisis or resolution, or the specific moment when a life begins to turn in a direction that feels, for the first time in a long time, like the right one. Raymond will try again, she said. Yes, through the standard channels. Slower, more prepared. Yes, Lorenzo said, and we'll be ready for it. Catherine is already building the longer-term strategy. A pause. Victor Hayes is no longer a concern. He made a calculation about which side of this was safer, and he made it quickly, which tells me he was never really committed to Raymond's play. He paused. Raymond is isolated. That doesn't make him harmless. But it changes the math. You keep saying that. It changes the math. Because math is the one thing Raymond understands, Lorenzo said. He doesn't understand people. He understands calculation. And the calculation keeps coming out against him. He turned to look at her. Because he keeps miscounting one variable. She turned to look at him. You, he said. She held his gaze. And in the particular quiet of a restaurant 2 hours before dinner service, with her daughter's voice audible through the kitchen door and the smell of good food, and the amber light that was softer in the afternoon, Sophia Bennett felt the last piece of something slide into place inside her, not with a click, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a thing that has been finding its way home for a long time, and has finally arrived. The job, she said. Manager. I want to start next week. Monday, he said. Marco will want to argue about the scheduling system. Don't let him. I never let anyone argue me out of the scheduling system, she said. I know, he said. That's why I want you running this floor. She looked around the restaurant, at the tables she had set 1,000 times, the bar she had walked past 1,000 times, the photographs on the wall, including the one of Lorenzo, and the mayor that she had always looked at, without looking at, The way you look at things that belong to a world adjacent to yours. It didn't feel adjacent anymore, Lorenzo, she said. Still here, the conversation, she said, the one you said existed. After Emma is safe and Raymond is out of my life in every way that matters. She looked at him. I'd like to have it now, not all of it, but the beginning of it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned on the bar stool to face her more fully. And he looked at her with those eyes that gave nothing away and saw everything. And for the first time since she had met him, she watched him make no effort at all to manage what was in them. I've been thinking about you, he said, since the moment I walked into this restaurant and saw someone standing in a wine-stained uniform with her chin up and her shoulder aching, and not 1 inch of surrender in her. A pause. I thought, whoever she has been through something that would have broken most people. And she is still here, still standing. Another pause, shorter. I have been unable to stop thinking about it since. She looked at him. She thought about walls, about how long she had spent building them, and how carefully she had placed each one, each brick mortared with a specific damage, and how she had believed for a long time that the wall was her, that she and the wall were the same thing, that removing it would leave nothing. She was finding out that was wrong. I've been thinking about you too, she said, which is terrifying. For what it's worth a lot, he said. Terrifying means it matters. Yes, she said, it does. From the kitchen, Emma's laugh came through the door, the real one, the one with the catch at the end of it, and both of them turned toward the sound instinctively, and then looked at each other. And the thing in the air between them was not just the beginning of something, but the recognition of something that had been building since Monday night, when a door opened at the wrong time and turned out to be exactly right. 6 weeks later, Raymond Cole left Chicago. He didn't announce it. He didn't call. He simply stopped being present in the city, in the way that certain men stop being present when the math has definitively failed them quickly, quietly, without ceding the narrative by acknowledging the retreat. Briggs told Lorenzo at 7 a.m. on a Thursday, and Lorenzo told Sophia at 7:15 while she was reviewing the inventory order for the week, and Sophia put down her clipboard and stood in the back office, her office now, Marco's old one, which she had rearranged on her second day so that the desk faced the door, and breathed for a moment. She started. Gone, Briggs said from the doorway where he'd delivered the news. His people are clearing out of the West Side property. His attorney filed a withdrawal from the standard custody petition yesterday afternoon. He paused. Whatever Catherine put together on the racketeering connections, he decided it was more expensive to stay than to go. Sophia looked at her clipboard, at the inventory numbers, at the ordinary functional, completely hers work of a morning she had built herself. Thank you, Briggs, she said. Briggs nodded and left. She sat down in her chair. She thought about Raymond Cole driving out of Chicago the same way she had driven out of her old life 3 years ago in the dark, not looking in the rearview mirror, telling himself it was strategic rather than defeat. She thought about how much of her life she had spent afraid of this man, and how that fear had been the correct response to a genuinely dangerous situation, and how carrying it for so long had made it feel like a permanent condition rather than a reaction to a circumstance that was now over. It was over. Not perfectly, not completely. The standard custody case had been withdrawn, but Raymond Cole was still Raymond Cole, and she would remain watchful in the way that women who have survived certain things remain watchful, because vigilance that has kept you alive doesn't simply switch off. But the daily weight of it, the particular darkness of knowing he was close, in this city, moving through it, was gone. She picked up her phone. She called Emma, who was in school, and left a voicemail that said only, "He's gone. Call me after class. I love you." Then she went back to the inventory order, because there was a restaurant to run. The night Lorenzo told the staff about Sophia's promotion, he did it simply stood in the dining room before the Friday dinner service, and said that effective immediately, Sophia Bennett was the general manager of Moretti's, and that her decisions on staffing, scheduling, supplier relationships, and floor operations were final, and that he expected the transition to be smooth because she already knew this restaurant better than anyone in the room, including him. Marcus, the senior server who had been at Moretti's for 8 years, and who had been frozen at the pass-through the night Victor Hayes threw the wine glass, started to applaud. The rest of the staff joined him. Sophia stood at the end of the bar and absorbed it, not uncomfortably, not with the performative modesty she had spent years wearing, but with the direct, genuine acknowledgement of someone receiving something they know they have earned. "Thank you," she said. "Now let's get the floor ready. We have a full house tonight." They moved. She moved with them. She walked the dining room the way she had walked it for 3 years, but differently, not disappearing inside it, not working the edges of visibility. Seeing everything, noticing what needed adjusting, what was already right, what she would change and what she would leave, because it had always worked. She stopped at table 7, the corner booth near the back window. She stood at it for a moment. She rearranged the water glasses. She straightened the centerpiece. She looked at the table the way you look at a place where something significant happened, not with fear, not even with anger anymore, just with the recognition of a person who understands that certain moments are the hinge on which everything else turns. Victor Hayes had sat here and decided she was nobody. Lorenzo had walked in and decided otherwise. She had walked into a courtroom and confirmed it herself. She moved to the next table. The evening Lorenzo finally took her to dinner, not at Moretti's, because she pointed out that eating at the restaurant you managed was not dinner but a working meal, regardless of what you ordered. She wore the green dress that Ellen had insisted on buying her in the weeks after the hearing, the one that had been hanging in the Lakeview apartment closet for a month because she hadn't had the occasion or the courage yet. It turned out those were the same thing. He picked her up at 7. He was in a dark suit with no tie, which she filed away as significant, because in every other context she had seen him, the tie was present, and its absence communicated something she chose not to overinterpret and simultaneously absolutely interpreted. Emma, who was doing homework on the couch when he arrived, and who had by this point had 4 kitchen sessions with Marco, and therefore considered herself an authority on all Moretti-related matters, looked up from her textbook and assessed him. "You're not wearing a tie," she said. "No," he agreed. "Good," Emma said, and went back to her homework. Sophia met Lorenzo's eyes over Emma's head, and he was doing the thing where the smile came before he could manage it, which was the thing she had decided she could look at indefinitely, without it ever becoming less interesting. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. She was. 1 year after the night, Victor Hayes threw a wine glass on the floor of Moretti's restaurant and the entire dining room went silent. A woman named Sophia Bennett sat across a table from a reporter who covered Chicago's business community and explained, without performance and without modesty, how she had turned around the operational model of a 40-year-old institution and grown its revenue by 31% in 12 months. The reporter had done her research. She knew about Moretti's. She knew about Lorenzo. She knew, in the way journalists know things they've heard about, and confirmed peripherally, something about the week in which all of this had begun. She asked, toward the end, "How would you describe your role in the restaurant's transformation?" Sophia looked at her. She thought about a clipboard and an inventory order. She thought about a scheduling system that Marco had tried to argue about for 3 days before conceding it was objectively better. She thought about the 6 suppliers she had renegotiated, the 2 she had replaced, the server she had promoted, who had been overlooked for 2 years, and who had turned out to be the best shift supervisor the restaurant had ever had. She thought about table 7. "I would describe it as doing the job I was always capable of doing," she said, "in an environment that finally gave me room to do it." And Lorenzo Moretti, she met the reporter's eyes. "He gave me the room," she said. "What I built in it was mine." The reporter wrote something down. "One more question," she said. "People who know this story, who know how it started, they ask how a man like Lorenzo Moretti ends up changed by a situation like this. How do you answer that?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. She thought about a man who had walked into his own restaurant, expecting a normal Tuesday, and had instead seen something that reminded him, in the most direct way possible, of everything he had spent 16 years carrying. She thought about a sister whose name had finally been said out loud in a courtroom. She thought about a first aid kit opened by hands that knew what they were doing, about an invitation delivered as a fact, about a card placed on a desk. He wasn't changed by the situation, she said. He was always the person he showed up as that night. He just needed a reason to stop being it so carefully hidden. She paused. The situation gave him the reason. That's different from the cause. The reporter looked at her. "And you?" Sophia thought about a bag under a bed, repacked every 6 months for 3 years. She thought about Emma's laugh through a kitchen door. She thought about a green dress worn, for the first time, to a dinner that was just dinner, just the beginning of something that didn't need to be named yet, because it already knew what it was. "I was always going to get here," she said. I just needed to stop running long enough to arrive. That evening, she was back at the restaurant by 6 because a general manager's hours were the hours the restaurant needed, and she had made peace with that in about 48 hours because she loved it, flat out loved it. Which was a sentence she had not been able to say about any part of her professional life since before Raymond, and the loving of it was its own kind of answer to a question she hadn't known she was asking. Lorenzo came in at 6:30. The way he came in most evenings, through the back, past the kitchen, where Emma occasionally materialized on weekends to terrorize Marco with increasingly complex pasta questions, into the small hallway that smelled like olive oil and old wood, past the office that was now hers. He stopped in the doorway. She was on the phone, finishing a conversation with a supplier about a delivery schedule that was 2 days behind. She held up one finger without looking up. He waited. She finished the call. She set the phone down. She looked up. He's back on schedule, she said. Thursdays. Good, he said. Emma wants to know if she can help with the Sunday lunch service this weekend. She can help Marco prep, he said. Not the floor. She's 13. That's what I told her. She's negotiating. Of course she is. She looked at him in the doorway of her office in his restaurant in their city, and she thought about the first time she should sat in this office with a first aid kit between them and a question she didn't know how to answer. She knew how to answer it now. Come in, she said, or we're going to be late for the service. He came in. He sat across from her, and Moretti's restaurant began its evening, the way it began every evening now, with the sound of a floor that knew what it was doing, a kitchen that took its work seriously, a dining room lit in amber that had seen the worst of people and the best of them, and had kept its tables set through all of it. Because that was what a good restaurant did. That was what good people did. They kept the table set. They kept the light on. They kept standing, not because they hadn't been knocked down, but because standing was the decision they had made, and they had made it on every ordinary night, and every impossible one, and they would keep making it for every night that came after. Sophia Bennett had been a waitress trying to survive. She had become the woman who ran the room, and the strongest person in that restaurant, in that story, in that city, in that life she had built from nothing, and rebuilt from less than that, had never once been the man who walked in the door. It had always been the woman who was already there, who had always been there, who had never, not once, stopped standing.